Ready? Good morning. It's 9:05. I'd like to call the Tuesday, January 21st, 2025 meeting of the Tucson-Pima County Joint Code Committee to order. Roll call, please.
Rick Bright,
Here.
Dennis Kuhn, Fred Knapp,
Here.
Jeff Hamstra, Ken Cawthorn, Thomas Hayes,
Here.
Dave Gibbons.
Here.
Chair, Mr. Chair, we have 4 members present and 3 members absent. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minute meeting. Here to make a motion or- Yes. Okay, we had a couple. Okay, you in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so we have a motion by Fred Knapp and a second by Dave Gibbons. Okay. Item number 3. Review edits to the 2024 National Building Code Amendments. So this is primarily housekeeping. So Dan or Clayton, you wanna have anything to add?
I believe I just updated, based on meetings, discussion, the counties to match what the city had done for the, I believe it was the vapor barrier on, in the IBC. I don't remember the chapter, section number off the top of my head. Find it.
This is Clayton with the City of Tucson. So the section was entirely removed from the IBC amendments to require a letter from the registrants when a vapor barrier is not used. The committee discussed if all commercial structural plans are designed by a registrant, then the registrant is acknowledging on the plans when they seal it, and therefore the letter seemed like redundant requirement. So at the committee's request, we removed that item from the IBC.
Okay. Well, if you look at your package, you've got pages from the county and pages from the city. So basically, this is an effort to pick up the last minor comments and coordinate the 2 amendments.
Precisely.
Right. Yep. So does anybody have any comments on the house cleaning? Well, I guess we need to approve this, because didn't we approve this before?
This reflects the change that was requested. So at the last meeting, you voted to approve pending that change. And so this reflects that change
Okay. Well, the
that
question
you already
is,
voted on.
do we need to reapprove this?
Only if you want additional changes. So
Okay,
This-
we already approved these
this
changes.
version reflects what you requested to or
Okay.
voted on.
So if no one objects, we'll move forward on this building code amendments. Any objections? Okay. Takes us to item number 4, which is the edits of the 2024 mechanical code.
Again, this is Clayton. These are editorial in nature. There was a addition requested to the end of the sentence to allow tray 15 in its accompanying document. So section 1101.1 now has a new sentence at the end of the amendment that states the refrigeration system shall meet the requirements of this chapter or ANSI ASHRAE 15/2024 with a companion standard ANSI ASHRAE 34/2024. So again, this change reflects what the committee had consensus on at the last meeting. Hey, Ken.
Okay.
So
For the record, Ken Hawthorne joined us at 9:10.
Ken, back up to speed, I'll repeat what I just said.
Okay.
The 24 IMC amendments included in today's agenda item includes the sentence requested by the committee that ASHRAE 15 and ASHRAE 34 are an acceptable alternate. So the amendment at section 1101.1 has a new sentence at the end of it that says the refrigeration shall meet the requirements of this chapter or ANSI ASHRAE 15, etc.
Which is what we discussed. And you're okay with that, Ken?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So here again, we've approved this, so we don't need to reapprove it
Correct.
unless somebody wants to add something. Okay. Any comments? Anybody good with the amendments? Okay. So that takes us to item 5. Continued discussion of the International Energy Conservation Code. I don't think this one's gonna go smooth.
So to begin the conversation, Mrs. Clayton, I wanted to bring to the committee's attention the new amendment in section C 101.4, which allows group R2 multifamily to comply with either the residential provisions or the commercial provisions of the International Energy Conservation Code. This amendment is modeled after other cities in Arizona that have essentially had this on their books for some time. The city of Phoenix has had a similar amendment for the past few code cycles. In my discussion with the building official of the city of Phoenix, they are proposing to continue maintaining this amendment. The city of Chandler has already adopted the 2024 IECC, and their amendments are posted. Their 2024 code adoption takes effect July 1, 2025 this year. And they have also included an amendment almost identical to this. There's really only slight language changes in order to be consistent with the language of our other amendments, the format. But for all intents and purposes, this is the same amendment that we will see implemented in multiple cities up in Maricopa County. So we are proposing to mimic that amendment here in Tucson, so that Southern Arizona is consistent with the Maricopa County.
What do you mean the Maricopa was consistent with? Okay, did they give a rationale for that amendment?
They don't have anything officially posted. And I haven't heard specifically why. But I will say that there have been some concerns that affordable housing would be put at a disadvantage in the Tucson region if we don't mimic this, because the point threshold to comply with the residential provisions is lower. That is to say, it is easier to achieve compliance with the energy code using residential provisions. So in order to make sure that affordable housing is not put at a disadvantage to Maricopa County, we are encouraging Tucson to follow suit.
And it used to be the opposite. It used to be more energy for efficient, restrictive, whatever terms you want to use for residential than commercial. What I've heard talking to, I didn't talk to the building official, others in Phoenix, is there's that challenge. They're building a wood frame. When you hit 4 stories, it jumps to commercial. It's built the same, I mean, versus a 3-story. And so that was the big issue, whether they're going to build a 30-story is the big, another question, but 4 to 3, it's the same building, or even 5 to 3. So I think that was what I had heard, is that was touching that, but they didn't expect typical residential construction when you went high rise.
suppose it's possible, but not, that's not the case in this part of the world. This question is, with that amendment, where do we stand with the energy code? Especially on commercial.
Right. So I did dive in, this is Ken. I did dive into it further. As far as the big thing that I see, there are differences, but they're pretty minor throughout the code as far as what the requirements are. The biggest issue, like I said before, were these additional efficiency requirements that they have in 406. And that was the hardest part. So what I went into it pretty hard here, you know, over the last month, and found that I think that even though the numbers are quite high that they're requiring for the additional efficiencies, I think they are achievable. It's just, it's gonna take someone, on the design side now, somebody has to then be in charge of, you know, managing this. It's like a lead project. It truly is a lead project. Every project now has to be lead, basically, this to get these additional credits. And they are, I think they are achievable. What I thought was the one that I'm struggling with, though, is this requirement for the renewable and load management credits. So the load management credits, and that kicks in if it is greater than 5,000 square feet. So, which is a lot of buildings. So the biggest part is not necessarily, the renewable part was only one credit item. All the other credits that you can obtain are load management. And that's where it gets to be where you have to have a control system or controls that will respond to the peak demands from the utility company. So you have to have either, you know, lighting load management, HVAC load management, automated shading, electric, you got to have either electric energy storage, thermal storage, or, you know, all these different building, thermal building mass, where you get these points based on trying to, you know, trying to reduce the loads during peak times, trying to reduce the demand, so you don't get demand charges. The thing that's difficult I see is, you know, Tucson Electric Power usually doesn't have demand charges other than on large facilities, and we never really got into having to do load management that way. There are some facilities that do it, but they're large facilities. For instance, U of A does it. Some of the larger hospitals do it. The VA does it. TMC does it. And so I know Carondelet does it, you know. So I know some of the larger facilities have those demand charges, and they do load shedding and things like that, or to try to, you know, minimize their demands. So I just, what I don't know is and I was hoping Dennis would be here, because I'm trying to figure out how many of our normal buildings that are in the 5,000 to 10,000 square foot range even have demand charges. And if they don't have those demand charges, then they have to comply. They have to basically have, you know, I'm not sure how they would have meet some of these credits that are in that section 406.3, which has to do with those load shedding credits. And that's where I guess I'm struggling still with this section of section 406. So, last time we talked about maybe we make some of these requirements for only larger facilities. And that is an option that I think that I keep leaning towards, especially with this, the 406.3, which is the renewable and load management credits. And then maybe what we do is start out with them for only larger buildings and, a much higher number. And as we get more into this and learn more about how to apply these credits and how to obtain them, we can re-review it and maybe reduce that back down to the code standards. But I'm just worried that it's such I'm not even sure how to obtain some of these credits that are in that section. The other one I went through pretty thoroughly, and I think it can be done. It's going to be a lot on electrical, some on mechanical, some on the architect, and some on the owner. But for smaller buildings, it's going to be challenging no matter what, because you've got a 2,000 square foot building and you got to make it it's basically you got to do LEED certified, and the amount of points you're doing like LEED gold.
Right.
Yeah, so you're doing
You never see a 5,000 square foot building.
right. 2,000 it's for 406.1, it's anything 2,000 greater than 2,000 square feet. So you're doing LEED for 2,000 square feet higher. Any building 2,000 square feet and higher.
Cost benefit.
So that's where I'm struggling, is just that. And so there's going to be a huge impact on cost on the design side, and a huge impact on cost on the construction side, because you're going to be basically, like we always said in LEED, you got to buy credits somewhere, and which is the least costly to the owner to obtain these. And so I guess that's where I keep struggling, is that I see the only way, I think it is feasible, because some of the credits that I see on not on the renewable, but on just the energy credits that are. Oops. Is that me?
Sorry, someone was calling me, sorry.
So just on the energy credits, I see some of them, they give you more, you have an option that you have the ability to get like 4 times the amount of points on some of these credits if you do more. On others, you can get the number they list is the maximum, but they prorate it. So it's a complicated formula no matter how you're doing it,
Right.
based on each of these credits and how we're going to obtain them.
Well, I noticed Dennis is online. Can he participate?
He cannot, I don't think he could vote, based on the request that your meetings are held in person.
Okay.
But if he comments, we definitely want to include it in part of the conversation. So if he types something in, we'll keep an eye out
Yeah,
for
I'd
it.
be interested in what Dennis's take on all this is.
Yeah, so I guess my big concern is, again, that 406.3, which is buildings 5,000 square feet and larger. Because of that, it has additional renewable and load management credits. The renewable ones are limited to just the one credit, which is pretty small. But it's mostly on load management. And I just, where they're managing the load based on the demand, the peak demand charges from the utility company. So the utility company sends out a signal that you're gonna hit this peak demand and you've gotta reduce your loads. So it either starts reducing lighting or starts raising the cooling set point on the HVAC so that you don't hit the demands. So that's what the only time I've ever gotten into that is again on very large utilities. So we've done it at the VA, TMC, and some other hospitals. But those are, 100,000 plus square foot facilities. So I just never done that for a 5,000 square foot.
Well, there may be a justification for raising that threshold, given that we skipped the 21 energy code.
Right.
Whereas in Phoenix, they adopted the 21, so they. had a
Only
bit of a more
Scottsdale
transition.
had. Phoenix
Cape Creek.
didn't, and Cape Creek, okay. Chandler did too? Okay, I wasn't aware Chandler did it.
They're moving forward from the 21 to the 24.
Right.
All right,
But since
So-
we skipped the 21, that's a bigger transition, a lot more questions.
right.
So what would you put the threshold at?
For load management, I guess it'd be where, what I need to find out is from TEP, where they start looking at demand charges for typical buildings. And maybe that's what we model, maybe that's how we model it, is that these square footages are based on, usually it's this rate structure that you get from TEP, which is a certain size, and that may be what we try to follow, is figure out how does that convert to square footage, what's the typical square footage? That's kind of my first thoughts on how we would do that. As far as the low end, I mean, like I said, right now, I think that these additional credits are obtainable, but they're gonna be tough. They are gonna require a lot more effort on everybody's part. So that has, I just don't know how else to.
Yeah. That's kind of been the problem, is it's an additional expense over the long term.
Right,
It will pay for itself, but financing is not structured to account for that. So
Right.
To finance a project, it's just the initial cost.
and not many people, when LEED first came out, a lot of people were doing it because it was relatively inexpensive. And then as LEED progressed, it became more and more expensive, and now it's really expensive, so I don't see it that often, even though City of Tucson, Pima County have mandates that you have to do it. They always say, well, there's they always back out of it on all their projects. And so I haven't done one in a long time.
So they do a lead equivalent.
Right. And they just say, yeah, we're gonna meet the requirements, but we're just not gonna get the certification. But now what it is you've got to submit the documentation, because it's got to be reviewed by, City of Tucson, Pima County. So.
This is more work all around.
Right. And I'm sure it's gonna be some kind of a comm check, which I haven't seen yet, to go through and try to document that. So.
Do we have any comments from our contractors?
No, I mean, point is warranted, normally we don't meet or exceed any deep requirements unless they're dictated by the owner, to do so, to do so. I think with TEP, a lot of times too, it's not based on their square footage. A lot of their rates are based on demand usage, the amount of kilowatt hours being used. And so,
Right.
and so that's kind of where they kick off the demand, usage. And, so how do you equate that, like you said, to square footage?
Yeah.
So, maybe we can have some verbiage in there that says, you know, once we figure out what the TEP.
Yeah, maybe it's not related to, maybe it's not related to square footage. Maybe it's just related to the TEP's rate
But
structure.
how do you know?
Yeah.
How much demand, you know, you can anticipate that and you can design, but you know.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in and uses
True.
it.
And yeah, and realize you still have Trico and you still have APS.
Right,
You know, in Pima County. So. Yeah, I'm just not sure.
And there'd be a small portion of Sulphur Springs too.
Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
And, you know, and so realize section 406 is 45 pages thick. I went through and kind of did just my note taking, and I got reduced it down to 15 pages just of notes. Trying to understand the sections. And so it's just a lot to absorb. And I think it's gonna be, and it's a big change going from, you know, at least the 21 had some of this, but it was pretty minor. You know, you had to get like, it was, I don't know, 10, 20, I think it was 10 points. That's what I remember. Now you're talking, depending on the type of building, you know, it could be over 100 points that you have to get. So. Anyways, and then again, if you're over 5,000 square feet, now you have to get these additional credits that are in 406.3, which those can be quite a bit too. So.
I don't see us accepting it the way it is. Because, how do we know how much it's gonna cost to build that facility? Unless you really do the research, you know, as far as how many extra hours is the architect's gonna spend, mechanical engineer gonna spend, the electrical engineer gonna spend. You know, what are those energy credits we can purchase and how much is that gonna cost? And it just, in the cost model part of it, it's kind of almost impossible.
Right.
To figure out what it's gonna cost to do that. So I don't think it's in the best interest of our constituents.
Yeah.
To accept it the way it is.
Yeah, and I went through, Clayton was good enough to send some documents that he had, I think from Chandler and other places that, you know, just go through and discuss it a lot. And there are, you know, they do talk about reducing load. And I mean, all this is reducing these additional credits. They're trying to reduce the energy use by, I think, 5 to 10%. So it's a lot of extra effort for that. Cause you're really at the height, you know, out there on that curve where you just.
This is Clayton. I believe the latest estimation is slightly over 7%. I want to say 7.2,
Right.
7.3%, but that's over the 2021.
Right.
How much
Yeah.
of the current code?
I don't know those numbers.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, part of the problem is we didn't have the 21 transition code.
Right.
Because I see problems, you implement this, you're gonna have architects, engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, city and county staff that are gonna have to be brought up to speed on what's not a simple code change. It's pretty complicated.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is. And I don't, you know, like all this load management is, you know, some of it can be controlled by TEP or if the utility company has it has that as an option. So like TEP does have an option where you can get communicating thermostats and they can actually get on and control your thermostat based on demand. And I'm sure, I would think they probably have that same capability with lighting. But I don't know, is Trico and Sulphur Springs, and I'm sure APS does, but I don't know.
APS probably does.
I don't know if those other utility companies have that ability. But, I mean, cause again, that's where I think for me, that's where I'm seeing the biggest hangup. Yeah, the additional energy credits, I think, are challenging. But the more I looked into it, the more I think they're doable. It's just they're gonna take more effort. More effort to design and more cost to construct. So,
Yeah, we don't know what those costs are. So it's hard to make a cost benefit analysis when the costs are not known.
right,
Like I said, financing a project does not account for the energy used over, 10-year period or whatever the
right,
financing terms are.
right. And I think that to me was one of the clear reasons why I think that some of these jurisdictions were saying about for the residential, allowing you to use the section R, because the R section of this code is much less complicated than the C section. So,
Which was probably a political decision.
yeah,
As I ventured to say, the residents account for more of the energy used than the commercial.
yeah,
It's because there's so many more houses and apartments.
right, right. So,
Where does that leave us?
well, I guess what we could do is, what I probably need to do is get with Dennis and try to determine where these demand charges or what energy utility companies can do and not do. I mean, we could contact Trico. The big ones are just those,
EPS and
yeah, Trico, APS and TEP. TP's the majority. But and see what they're capable of doing for these additional credits. And then maybe we could ease into the additional energy credits by increasing it from 2,000 to a higher number.
Okay.
So, and we could just, that could just be something we just say, yeah, if it's, because do we really want a 3,000 square foot building to have to basically get LEED certified?
Well, the ICC has a goal to meet that net zero requirement, yes.
So that is part of the discussion. I don't necessarily know that they have a specific goal at this point as directly associated with net zero. But continued energy efficiency is definitely a major intent of the Energy Code Committee. And then just to follow up on some of the things that have been said for clarity, I want to point out that section 406.1 specifies that 2,000 square foot buildings and larger shall comply with the additional energy efficiency credits, and buildings 5,000 square feet or larger shall comply with the load management. So just if you continue discussing modifying those thresholds, I just want to make that distinction between those two.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the key and for me, the hard, I do think the additional energy credits are obtainable, and I could go over those with you if you want. Their list is, spelled out in here, but I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 30. There's 32. So there's 32 additional energy credits that you can choose from. So it's a lot of choices. Now, a lot of those choices go away for certain occupancies or types of buildings. So it just depends. So it can reduce depending on the building. For your typical 3,000 or 4,000 square foot building, you're probably limited to about 20 of those options. So instead of the 30, but yeah, it's a lot to choose from. And obviously the bigger the building, the easier it's gonna be, because you just have more options at that point.
Well, we kind of ask the question, how's that gonna impact the built environment? So if it's too onerous for a smaller building, that means there are gonna be fewer of those smaller buildings and more of the large buildings that can justify the cost.
Right.
See the change in the built environment based on these regulations.
It could be.
That's a good thing, or maybe it's a bad thing, but I think it's gonna have an impact on the size of buildings get built, they're gonna get bigger and bigger. Small office or whatever, of 5,000 square feet or 4,000 square feet, those are gonna be a thing of the past. It's like you're saying physicians move out of their own private practice office into hospitals or whatever.
Yeah,
And those small practices are going away.
Banners doing like. They're kind of like, where they're building a big office building, doctors move to that.
Right.
Larger.
Yeah, I mean, just to let you know, so if you don't mind, I could just kind of quickly go through how these credits are broken down. They got them broken down. So these are the energy credits. They got them broken down into envelope credits. And then their HVAC credits, then their I call them water credits, which is the W. Yeah. And then they've water heating credits. And then they've got energy monitoring and lighting credits. And then they've got equipment credits. So just as far as the envelope goes, you can get they got them broken down into, there's this improved envelope performance, which has to go through basically has to meet ASHRAE 90.1 Appendix C, which I think is a more of this performance factor that you have to go through. That I didn't dive into that much, but you have to go through ASHRAE 90.1 Appendix C is what it's all related to. And the amount of credits that it has is depending on, again, what's in the ASHRAE determines the amount of credits that can be obtained. There's the component performance, which has another credit, which you have to be 15% below the performance of the wall, roof, and slab edge. So as far as the R values, but the amount of credits can only sometimes ranges from 1 to 13. Usually it's pretty low amount of credits that you get or points you get. It can go up to 13, but that's for E occupancies. There's reduced air leakage. You have to be 10% less than the maximum, but that does require you then to do a blower door test. There's added roof insulation. You can get credit for that. That requires either increasing your continuous or increasing your continuous by R10 by an additional R10, or for attic insulation, increasing that by an additional R13. You can get 50% of that, the credit amounts or the point amounts, by going to R5 continuous or additional R6.5 in the attic. The points on that really range from 1 to 2 points typically, but you could get up to 7 points for M and E occupancies and up to 10 points for an S occupancy. There's the next credit is wall insulation, requires additional R5 continuous. You can get 50% of the points by going on 2.5, and those and the point totals on those, depending on the occupancy, is 2 to 6 points typically. Could be as much as 15 for an M occupancy. So I mean, you could improve your fenestration. That one I thought was a really obtainable one, but it's typically only like 1 point you get for it for better windows. But you can get up to 11 points for different R occupancies and an E occupancy. So those are all of the energy. Those are all of the envelope credits. For HVAC, they've got this total system performance ratio. That basically requires an energy model of just the HVAC, but it still is an energy model. And it typically is only allowed to be used on larger systems, chill water, heating water systems, VAV systems. It's not allowed to be used if you just have smaller package units. So, but that had some high points, and 13 to 21 points, but again, it's not allowed on smaller systems, which is,
Doesn't make, I'm just gonna say.
yeah, but you got
You're not
to
gonna have.
3,000 or
nothing but
4,000
package
square
units
foot.
on 1,000 square foot and less probably.
Right, right.
Because it doesn't translate a lot to except for
Right.
that.
Then another credit was more efficient heating, which is you get no points for our region, other than maybe you get 1 point for an A2 occupancy is all you get. So even though you could go from 80% to 90% efficient, you don't get any points for it. You get for a more efficient cooling, you get you can go from 5 to 20% better cooling efficiency, but your points are only 2 to 4 points for all the occupancy. Realize I need 100 points, so and on a lot of these. For residential, you got another credit that's residential controls. That's only allowed for residential occupancies. But it gives you like 25 points, but it means that you now have to have like the learning thermostats, the ones that, they have to know, you have to have occupancy sensors, things like that. So even though you've got it scheduled to come on, it knows that you're not there, so it's going to still turn things off, things like that. There's another HVAC one that's for DOAS. It's only allowed where this is for controlling your outside air, but it's only allowed for buildings where you have a bunch of either water source heat pumps or a bunch of smaller units, and you're serving it from a single DOAS unit. So they're trying to push that. The points on that are pretty high, but again, if you're a 3,000 to 5,000 square foot building, that's the cost of a dedicated outside air system is going to be pretty high. But it can be done, and maybe that's what we're going to have to do to get those credits. Is you got 4 units, you're going to have a DOAS unit that is doing the 800 CFM of outside air to all those units. Then we get into the water heating system where there's 10 credits available. They range from, the first one was like recovered renewable hot water, which is basically, waste heat recovery from, like a chiller or water source heat pumps and stuff like that, and trying to recover some of that heat for your units. Another one was, using, heat pump water heaters. You get some credits for those points are typically around 2 points, but can be really high for residential. So if you, on residential, if you go, because they know they're giving you up to 74 points on that, because they know you're buying a lot more water heaters. High efficiency gas, hot water, you can get extra points for. That's another credit. Another credit is additional pipe insulation. So you got to do 1.5 times the thickness. So usually we're 1 inch thick. So now you'd have to go 1.5 inch thick on your hot water pipe insulation. Another one was if you go point of use hot water heaters. Some of these are not, you go one or the other. So so you have to do, you could do point of use water heaters. That's only allowed on B or E occupancies greater than 5,000 square feet. So it's only allowed on some. Thermostatic balancing valves. This is on the recirc system. You get some points on those. Or if you do, instead of doing recirc, if you do heat trace system, which, is just, you do for instead of doing a recirc. And hot water sub-meters, that's only for our occupancies. And only for our occupancies that are served by a central hot water system. So you get some points on that, up to 16 points. Then the last one was hot water flow reduction. That one is pretty obtainable because that one you just have to go with reduced. But it's only for, really for our occupancies, again. So not for commercial. Then there's last one was shower drain heat recovery, which I don't know if you've seen those, but those take the drains from showers and tubs and run it through a heat exchanger to recover some of that heat. Then we get into energy. Sorry, I'm going through these. So there's energy monitoring, but that's only for buildings that do not comply with C40513. But that's required, and that's only required for buildings that are greater than 10,000 square feet. So anyways, goes through that. Then there's lighting, and there's 6 different credits that you could look at for lighting. There's high-end trim lighting controls, which can give you quite a few, typically 1 to 6 points, but on M occupancies and S occupancies, it could be 13 or 14 points. But that is going above and beyond not less than 50% of the interior floor areas are exempt. So in other words, it's doing a lot more lighting controls than what's even required in the code. There's increasing the occupancy sensors, and they give a whole list of different rooms additional rooms that you can add to that. And that's another 2 to 6 points typically. There's increased daylight area, which is you got to be 5% greater than what's currently required for daylighting. There's residential light controls. So that has to do with the occupancy sense. Same thing with the HVAC, where you got an occupancy sensor and more lighting controls because usually you don't have residential light controls. And so this does allow that, but again, only on residential occupancies. And then there's reduced lighting levels. Yeah, you already are where, so now you get additional points for, you gotta be 5% better than, at least 5% better. But this credit, you can get up to 4 times the points. So typically they're 2 to 8 points, but you can get up to 4 times that, depending on how much better reduction you are in lighting. So that was in there. And so that's all the lighting ones. Then we get into equipment. So there's elevator equipment, but that's only for buildings 3 or more floors and a Class A elevator. But not the hydraulic type. There's efficient equipment, efficient commercial kitchen equipment, but that's only for A2 occupancies or facilities with a minimum of 1 fryer. There's efficient residential kitchen equipment, but only for our occupancies. And then there's fault detection and diagnostic systems, which that one is typically only allowed for buildings over 100,000 square feet. So that's just really quick going through the options that you have, which there's a lot there.
Yeah, this is red though. I mean, I still see that, you may have a client that comes to your rec and says that I want a 5,000 square foot building. And you still may not be able to achieve those 100 points because of all of the, there's just only so much you can do.
Right. So you're buying,
Yes, say you're.
Wow.
Your framing numbers are only a certain size, so you can only do so much insulation. And then, you're saying, okay, so I need to do, polystyrene on the roof or and that adds tremendous amount of cost.
Right, right.
And then you're trying to jump through these hoops to get this 100-point certification, and you may not even achieve it.
Right.
That's my question. It's that gray area between the 2,000 and probably 7,500 or 8,000 square foot buildings that are gonna have a hard time meeting that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I that's all I'm saying.
And that's why I'm thinking, just like I do with, we do with LEED projects all the time. We say, we have to buy some points. If you want this to be this certification level, we have to start buying points.
Yeah.
So we have to go through and put costs on each of these points and have the owner decide which ones he wants to buy, because he has to get to this point value.
Well, it's just
So-
the whole exercise you're gonna have to go through to get to that.
Right.
See, what's it gonna cost to build it, and can I even achieve it? And if I can achieve it, how much it's gonna cost? So I'll still need to build it to that point and then buy X number of amount points, and then what's that gonna do to the cost of construction to the building?
Right.
Let's look at all the design time. Just to get.
I'm
We'll see if
just
it's in
saying
favor.
all the work
Right.
that has to be done,
Right.
yeah. So I just don't know how we can accept it as is.
Yeah, and like I said, and then we haven't even got into this whole renewable. Let me just go through that real quick, just so you can see what that is. And that's typically required for 5,000 square feet or greater than 5,000 square feet. And those point values are typically around, I don't know, close to around 50 points. Some of the buildings, some will go up as much as 90, some are down as low as 9, but just depends. So typically around 50 points that you need. So you can go, the only renewable part of this whole thing is the first credit, which is renewable energy. So it requires a minimum of an additional 0.1 watts per square foot of renewable energy. And then they got a formula you go through where you can get more depending on your points. Now that, hold on a sec. That point can be as much as typically around, I don't know, 10 to 20 points. But it's a pretty complex, I really need to understand that a little better and probably just go through that with Dennis. on how that's obtained. But that's just on renewable energy, going above and beyond what's currently already required for most buildings. Then all the rest of the credits, there's 7 additional credits that you can, so there's only 8 credits that are available to choose from to get this additional 50 points or whatever. But only one of them is related to renewable energy. All the rest are related to load management. So you got lighting load management, where the lighting has to react to have a load management. You know, it's looking at it has to look at demand and start reducing lighting if we get close to demand, peak demand. HVAC has to have automatic controls to start changing the temperature set point if you start getting close to peak demand. That's another one. The other one is automated shading load management, which when you start getting close to peak demand, you have to have automatic shading, that whether they're louvers or something that comes down on the exterior, whether it's exterior or interior, you get so many credits for points on that. There's electric energy storage, where you have to store a minimum of 1.5 to 15 watt hours per square foot. And then you get prorated points depending on how many you are storing. There's cooling energy storage, which is literally ice or thermal chilled water storage. There's another one is service hot water energy storage, where you're storing hot water that's at a higher temperature for a lot. Oops.
It was this whole time. I don't know what happened.
Okay. So there's a lot to it.
Well, let me ask you a question here. If you got a large retail center where most of the building is shell space,
There,
how does that get calculated?
it
There's
is.
gonna be a tendency to dump all that cost on the tenant.
There's a core, shell, and build out construction. It defines how that is Yeah, so,
There's a lot of coordination there.
and that's why I think maybe it is a good idea, just, I mean, and maybe the minimum is for the additional energy credits, maybe it's something like 10,000 square feet. And for the renewable and load management, maybe it's something like 50,000 square feet. I mean, I'm just shooting out some numbers here right now, but just to try to get those, maybe we start out that way. And then we could always reduce it if we're finding that, we want to make it more in line, and maybe we just have to reevaluate that each year.
Yeah, the problem is we're on a trajectory to more energy efficient buildings, and by skipping the 21 code, we're kind of behind the curve.
Right,
So
right.
raising the thresholds kind of makes sense, just as a transition, kind of catch up with the rest of the world.
This is Clayton. We'd be happy to reach out to TEP and TRICO to find out what their rate modeling is at rate management thresholds.
Yeah.
To find out if that can help guide your decision.
Okay. That would, yeah,
We'll have that for the February meeting.
okay. Yeah, because like I said, I think these, with that option of 30 credits in there, and some of those you get a lot more points if you go above. If you do more than what they're saying, they give you that option of, everything's kind of, most of the points are typically prorated, but some of them prorated so that they'll give you more points even.
You know, above it.
Right, if you go above it, so. I think that. I think it is probably doable, but for a 3,000 square foot building. What I would think, usually you're looking at something that's just gonna be really
Cost
difficult,
prohibitive.
yeah.
So you're thinking adjust these thresholds and then what, a year or two down the road, reevaluate?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, that's what I would propose, right, is that we start out with those up pretty high, and we could always reevaluate and bring them down. Because I also want to see what other jurisdictions are doing, and if they're just accepting them like this, I want to know how are they able to get these buildings to pass with that? Or what measures are they having to go through? And are they extraordinary measures to get buildings to pass?
So this is Clayton. We know that one jurisdiction in Arizona has adopted the 24, but it isn't implemented yet. So
Right.
we likely do not have buildings being constructed yet,
Right,
according to the 24 IECC. So we don't have data there yet. But my discussions with building officials all throughout the state are there is a continuous push to adopt 2024 IECC. So that as of 2 weeks ago, there was still much interest across the entire state to adopt it as is without modifying it.
and that's what I've seen too. I mean, as far as Phoenix, I don't see them even adding any modifiers,
Correct.
and the only ones that like I said, most of the information in the code is fine. I don't have any issues with. It's just this section 406, the additional energy credits, that I'm really struggling with.
So this is Clayton again. As far as modifying any of the numbers, we talked at the last meeting about different things that could be modified, and the city of Tucson is going to lean away from trying to modify any of the point thresholds or any of that. The only really feasible value that could be modified easily is the size of the building threshold.
Right.
Simply because all of the software is based on these values. So if we go changing these values, then none of the software will work. But changing the size of the building that needs to comply would just essentially be a matter of which buildings need to meet those requirements. So that would be the only value that the city of Tucson could see changing without causing a much bigger impact to the design and review,
Right.
simply because the modeling software wouldn't work.
Well, it's complicated. I mean, different points for different occupancy groups, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what the rationale was, but I'm sure it was a lot of thought because it's not consistent between occupancies, right? Point system.
No,
So there was a rationale there and you don't mess with that, you're gonna muck up whatever that.
There is quite a bit of documentation that was provided by Pacific Northwest Laboratory on how those point values were established. But essentially, it is with the intent to create between a 6 and 8% improvement over the aggregate of the buildings. So they're looking at the aggregate of all the new buildings built within a category, and they're saying the aggregate energy savings of all of those buildings needs to target between that 6 and 8%, and that's how they come up with it.
And that's based on
Point
the
thresholds.
21 code.
Correct.
I would say that this is an operation in the Northwest, so Washington State is where. I think this is where this came from in Washington State. I didn't look on the commercial committee. And so Washington and Oregon, it's not California. But they've had a credit system like this operating, which was more complex than the credits in the 2021, which was more simple. Energy efficiency credits.
And then another question that was brought up at a previous meeting was, did we have any representation from the southwestern United States on those energy committees? And the answer to that is yes. We have 2 representatives from Arizona and a representative from Nevada on the Commercial Energy Code Committee. So while the Pacific Northwest may be driving some of the science behind this, we do have representation with our desert climate.
Michael Cunningham from Las Vegas.
And Anthony Floyd from Scottsdale. Yeah. Okay, sorry for the noise downstairs. They're replacing water here.
They get a permit?
They get permit.
Well, so it sounds like adjusting this threshold on the building side is the
Yeah.
way to go, but we need to find some justification for whatever number.
Correct.
We can't
I don't
pull it
wanna
out
just
of the air.
pull something out of the air, right? I think it, and so for the additional efficiency, for the additional energy efficiency credits, I think that one we need to look at, what size building is it gonna be, are these credits gonna be more easily obtained? Right? What threshold is that? Whereas the renewable and load management, I think is a question more on the utility company. So, and what we could do is convert whatever those whenever they start getting into demand charges, what we could kind of back into a square foot building size from that. So that's what I would propose we do.
So we beat this one to death?
Yeah.
A lot of great information.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's the problem when you skip the energy flow. The jump becomes quite significant. Okay. So I had one question. What's in the packet, we've got the residential code amendments.
mhm.
Is that just for information? Because it's not on the agenda.
I know what on the agenda, I think, I'm not sure. Added the wrong one. Is it
Okay,
from the county?
both, I think. City of Tucson. Yeah, just City of Tucson.
The City of Tucson, for table in 1101.11.1 for the exterior design conditions, because we were adjusting the the temperature for those design conditions. We were matching what the county had proposed, but we matched the wrong category because Pima County has 3 categories.
Right.
The west side of the state, the high elevation, the low elevation, so we mistakenly took the wrong category, so that was, just a editorial error. So we're correcting that to make sure that we're consistent with the county, which means that I believe we're really only adjusting the temperature.
Okay, but that needs review and approval by this committee, right? So
We'll have that on the next agenda.
next month, because we can't add it at this point. Okay, that takes us to item
Yeah.
6, which is the
Can I
call
ask
to the.
Ask a question, Jim Myers. There is a mistake in the residential code. I didn't bring this to your attention. We just worked it through Clark County and their updates. It's in the simulated building performance path for residential, where, if you recall, the 2024 codes as developed by the committees had things like infrastructure in it, had renewable energy in the code and building electrification, readiness in the code. Those all got stripped out. But there's a piece here in simulated building performance, which says if you use, if you're following the building performance and you have to reach a threshold that's 80% of the code, so 20% less if you're using fossil fuels. But that was a piece that wasn't stripped out when the board said, no, we don't want all of that in the base code. So I can write up a proposal to strike this. According to ICC, it's not an errata. It won't be, they won't fix it in an errata, so it has to be fixed at local development, so residential, not
Right.
commercial.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing that. If this is Clayton, if possible, can you have it within a week or
Oh, yeah.
2?
Yeah.
Simply because we pushed this committee
Right,
meeting
so
back,
we
we
should-
have less time before the
Right.
next
I'll
meeting.
take the language I used for other than that.
Okay, thank you. We would appreciate that.
Thanks.
So we could distribute to the committee members.
So we're on call to the audience.
There is nothing to report right now. No one said anything.
Everybody must be happy, huh? Okay, so that takes us to item 7, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Second. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.
Meeting adjourned at 10:19 a.m.
Thank you. Yeah.